I'm going to talk about the difference between the principles, working with the principles, and using a cognitive approach, because the principles are often they look to people like a cognitive approach, and once people learn about the principles, and I'll speak from my own experience, it can turn into a cognitive approach really fast without you having any idea that you've switched approaches. I'm just seeing a lot about that lately myself, so I'm just going to talk about the little I've seen, but actually the way that I saw it was in my parenting. There was I have a 10-year-old, and he was having trouble with some of his friends, and I found myself trying to think my way through his problems. I found myself trying to find a way to help him through explaining and connecting the dots for him. And it when he was younger, things like that would work. He would take my lead on things, and he would defer. And then he has a mind of his own, as he should, and he really wasn't, he kind of humor me and listen to me, but then he'd just do his own thing, and so what happened is I just felt more and more tension and pressure to explain better and to connect the dots better and more emphatically, and I found myself, the less he got influenced by me, I had the temptation to get more intense, and was essentially trying to change his thinking and explaining why he had to think differently than he thought. And then for whatever reason, one day I realized I can't think my way out of his problems. I can't figure out his problems and then lay them out to him and then have him be different, because we're two separate people. And not only can't I do that, but, well, first of all, I didn't want to do that, because it was a lot of pressure for me, and it was putting strain on our relationship, and I was feeling the heat from his problems. So not only didn't I want to, but I realized that I couldn't. And it was kind of the first time I realized that, we're two separate people, and he has his own free will, and he's going to see life the way he sees it, and he's going to do things as he sees fit. But what happened for me is that instead of frightening me and worrying that he wasn't going to land on his feet about it, I realized that he does land on his feet. I've landed on my feet about whatever things my parents tried to change in me and couldn't, and I landed on my feet about them, and all of a sudden I realized that I had been trying to go about my parenting through a cognitive process of getting into the content of what he thinks and trying to rearrange it and trying to instruct him and manage him and change him and influence the way that he thinks, and which is impossible to do as a parent in certain areas. Some areas you can pull it off, but what I realized is that as soon as I saw that about parenting, I realized that in my work with people, my work with my clients, I was trying to affect them and change them in their thinking. I was trying to help them with their thinking and getting into the content of it, and connect the dots for them about how their thinking works in a way that was helpful. And it was really helpful. It really helped them. What I was doing really helped them in the way that the instructions I would give my son about how to share and how to apologize to people was really helpful to him. And so I just kept trying to do that about everything. Well, what I realized is that I don't that's not going to work ultimately as a plan. And what I saw is that what we're trying to do with the principles is something bigger than that and something deeper than that, and we're pointing to something that is before the content or before the problems that they're having. But we're actually trying to point to the fact that they're living in their own thinking and the fact that they think, and we don't have to instruct them about what to think, because that changes on its own as their thinking changes. So the more they see that they're living that the way they see life is made up, the more they see that the way that the life as they see it is made up inside of them. It's not a truth. It's just their own version of a truth. It's not real. They don't have to change it. It just changes on its own. And I had this idea that I had to do that for them. What I realized is that while I'm busy doing that for them, they're getting the message that that there's something they need to change, that they have to personally change their own thinking. And as soon as I realized, I don't have to do that for them, I don't have to do anything with their thinking, such as it is, my agenda I stopped having an agenda that was about changing them and instructing them and helping them manage and helping them reframe the way they saw things. And what happened is I started seeing that the point I was making was just that they're living in a world of thinking, and it changes. So what happened in my parenting is that the problems I was trying to think through and think my way out of and figure out, I would just, at some point, they look different to me. And what I saw about my son and his friends is that that's going to have to play out on his own, and I don't know how that's going to work, but I saw a peace of mind about it that came to me, and I did not think my way there. So the point of the principles is to wake people up to the fact that we're thinking up all of our problems, that our problems are coming from thought. So to feel like you have to go and rearrange them doesn't make any sense. So to the degree that was making sense to me, I didn't really see in those moments, I wasn't really looking at the principles. I thought I was. And I don't know. So the message that I had about the principles and my understanding about the principles was creating the idea that there was pressure on me. And the pressure I felt, this is how I know when I fall into that trap, because I fall into that trap without realizing now. What it feels like is there's a pressure on me to create an airtight logic that shows them what to do with their thinking. And sometimes it's the logic is about showing them that they can have faith in life, or the logic is about that you can let go of thought. Whatever the logic is, it's a cognitive logic. It's me trying to install a different kind of thinking in them. And that's what I was trying to do with my son. And I was living under the impression that had to happen. And that's a trap people fall into. I fall into it too. I don't know anybody who teaches the principles that doesn't fall into that. And it's something, there's a way in which that's just my own misunderstanding of the principles. It's not the point, but it's a way in which I can get lost. And people can get lost into thinking that that's what we're out there trying to do. That's our mission. And to realize that we don't have to do that just takes a huge amount off of my mind. So I know that if there's a lot on my mind when I'm working with someone, that I'm not really understanding what I'm trying to do. I've fallen into a cognitive process. And as soon as I snap out of that, there's a feeling of freedom and a feeling of my confidence in the person comes back, and it looks to me like we're both looking at something that doesn't require a lot of work.